Welcome to the Author to Authority podcast. And I am so happy to have Jeff West with us today. Now, Jeff West and I are in a group together with Bob Burg of the Go-Giver series. And Bob and I will both tell you that if you have never read the Go-Giver, you need to. It is going to change the way that you do business. It's going to revolutionize you, and it's going to blow your mind. And also, if you go back to the second episode, because the first episode was all about me, but if you go back to the second episode of the Author to Authority podcast, I interviewed Bob. So I'm excited today for the conversation with Jeff, because I know him and he has done amazing things. And every time we're in a mastermind together and he shares his thoughts and ideas, I am just like so blown away. Now, he's an award-winning author of the heartwarming business fable, The Unexpected Tour Guide, and we're going to be talking about that today. He's been a guest on national sales shows such as the Go-Giver Influencers, The Buyer's Mind. He's been in Marketing Management Magazine, the National Federation of Independent Business, Peak Sales Recruiting. You've been seeing him all over the place. And for over 30 years, Jeff has coached and led sales teams in multiple industries and has been among the top sales performers and leaders in the nation. And so we're so glad to have him here today, because he's going to be talking to us about sales and entrepreneurship and how sometimes our brain and our heart can trick us and keep us from moving forward as an entrepreneur. So Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kim. I'm honored to be here.
So Jeff, why don't you share a bit of your story with us so our audience can get to know you a bit?
All right. Well, I actually have degrees to teach. I'm originally from a little town in Northwest Georgia that very few people would even know. It's called, the name of it's Dalton. But in college, I actually have degrees to teach. I'd originally planned to be a band director. I got a bachelor's in music education and a master's in music composition. And I immediately ended up in sales after college because my wife needed to work, and needed to finish her degree. So I needed to work, and there weren't any teaching jobs open. And started off in musical instrument sales, and then I went into industrial uniform sales, and that's how I ended up living in Texas, because the company moved me from Georgia to Texas to do that. Did that for a couple of years out here, and the company got bought out, and that buyout did not exactly go my way. It was one of those stories. Life is lived forward, but understood backwards. I am so glad it didn't work out my way, because a couple of years later, it's when I first became an entrepreneur, became self-employed. And I spent, 25 years, in the insurance industry. The first 20 of that is in actual sales leadership. And the way I was with a company called Aflac, and the way they're set up, everybody was self-employed. So that's what I did there. But I'm a much better entrepreneur probably than I am an employee in the long run. So I always tell people I'd rather shave the boss's face than kiss the boss's foot. So the entrepreneur is kind of my thing on that. The entrepreneurial journey for me wasn't just everything just went perfect the whole time. That's not what happened at all. I was one of those people that I was so burned out when I first started to work for myself because of what had happened prior to that. And I was one of the people also going under financially at the time. I was speaking at a place in Alabama this weekend, and I was telling people that, I even got advised, it was getting so bad, I got advised to go bankrupt. And I didn't go bankrupt for two reasons. Number one, I owed the debts, and I have a part of me just wouldn't let that go. And I actually did later go pay every one of those debts off. And the second reason I didn't go bankrupt was the attorney who told me I should do it wanted $1,200 to do it. I didn't even have enough money to go bankrupt. I was too broke to go bankrupt. But I had actually moved my family. My daughters were about 9 and 5, I guess, about this time, maybe 8 and 4. Anyway, I had moved my family out of this nice middle-class neighborhood where it was cul-de-sac, and all the kids were playing with each other, and they'd ride their bicycles down in the cul-de-sac. And we had to leave that place because I just couldn't afford to stay there at the time anymore. And we moved into a mobile home that I'm almost exaggerating when I call it a mobile home. It was old, it was worn out. The floor was falling through in some places. It was not a very comfortable experience for life. My girls had their own bedrooms, and in the new place they had to share a bedroom. And when I would walk through to kiss them goodnight, they had twin beds, and my legs literally would touch both beds when I walked in there to kiss them goodnight. It was a difficult time for the whole family. And the house that we had been living in the garage, the owner of the house, he didn't live in the same area. He lived in the same state, but Texas is kind of big, so it wasn't close. But he had told me we could store some things in the garage there, and then they were trying to sell the place anyway, and he would have the realtor contact me when he sold the house. Well, he either couldn't contact me or he forgot to contact me, and everything that we had in that garage was given away to Goodwill. And most of it wasn't a big deal, like clothes and some furniture and all that. But my two daughters' bicycles were in that garage.
Oh,
And
no.
I will never forget the day that I had to tell them that their bikes were gone. And
I could just imagine their reactions.
it was what a child will do, And they said, "Daddy, can we go get some more?" I said, "Not right now. We really can't." And so I remember going out on my front porch of that mobile home, and it was kind of a little rainy day. I don't remember what month it was, to be honest about it, but it was. I remember it was a little bit chilly, and it was raining, which probably meant it was spring, somewhere in that range. And I stayed out at the porch on that mobile home for probably 45 minutes because I couldn't go back in the house because they had stopped crying, but I was out there on that front porch, and I was a mess. I couldn't stop crying, quite frankly. And I felt defeated, and I felt like I was a failure, and I'd let my family down. But that day is when my career began to turn around, because it made me, I won't say mad because it's not the right thing, but it hit a nerve in me that I can't describe. And it's like mentally I drew a line in the sand, and I said, no more.
Yep.
I'm not gonna let my kids experience this kind of thing anymore. And I had as we would say back in Georgia, I had a come to Jesus meeting with myself.
Love it.
And but I kind of got my head on right that day, and I began to be more successful. Within about 6 months, I'd kind of turned things around. And I remember one day when they came home from school, it was about 6 months later, and I said, "Hey, get in the car, we're going to Walmart." And my oldest daughter, Lindsay, said, "Dad, I can't go to Walmart. I got homework." And I said, "I don't care what you have, we're going to Walmart." So we went to Walmart, and we get into Walmart, and I'm kind of, you already know this, I'm not a real shy person. And I'm going up and down the aisles in Walmart, and I am, the kids are trying to keep up with me. It was funny. I'm being kind of loud and boisterous, and we get back there, Kim, where they've got the toys, and they got the bicycles up on the rack. And I said, "Whoa." And I just stopped. I grabbed their coats. I said, "Look at that. Look at those bicycles. How did they get those bicycles up there?" And then I told Lindsay, my oldest, I said, "Yeah, Lindsay, you love yellow. There's a yellow bicycle up there." And I said, "Whitney, you love purple. There's a purple bicycle up there." And they said, "Yeah, Dad, that's great." And I said, "Guess what, kids?" And I tell you, Kim, I've had a great career. I've made good living. I've worked for myself for more than half my life. In what I've done, I've met presidents, I've met celebrities. I've just had a very unusual and blessed life. Became friends with Bob Burg, which was the biggest of all of it. But I wouldn't trade any of that for that moment in the middle of Walmart when I got down on my knees with my kids in the middle of a store. I gave them a hug and a kiss. I said, "Guess what?" And they said, "What?" And I said, "You can have anything in this store you want today. I can buy it." And I didn't spend $500 that day, but I wouldn't trade $1 million for it. I really wouldn't. It's some days you just, as an entrepreneur, we have to remember that some days everything we touch turns to gold, and some days everything we touch turns to something that's somewhat less shiny. And so you have to have something that will absolutely keep you in the game when that happens. And for me, it became, of course, my daughters are the most amazing thing in the world. I tell people, if they ever ask me if I believe in love at first sight, I say, absolutely I do, because from the very first day I held my daughters, either one of them in my arms, I fell hopelessly and helplessly in love with those girls forever. And So they were my why. They were my strongest emotional tie. And I just combined that with the logic of what I was doing. And if I went out and I made a sales call and someone was less than pleasant, I just looked at my pictures of my girls, which I had in my daytimer at the time, and looked at the girls, and it didn't matter how many people were that way. I was going to make sure my daughters never experienced that again.
Yeah.
Then I went on to have a multi-million-dollar career. It still wasn't overnight. It took a while, but it was a good career.
When you said that, it made me think back. When my kids were little, I made the choice to stay at home and raise them instead of going out to work.
Right.
And so there was a lot of times money was really tight.
Right.
And but I had an entrepreneurial spirit, so I did little things to bring in some extra money. I'm only now building a really big business, but I would do things.
Right.
And I remember we went to the mall, and the kids were small, and how sometimes they have the little fairs that come into the mall parking lot.
Right.
Well, the kids wanted to go on the rides, and I couldn't take them that day. And I thought, okay, what do I do? So I got on the phone, I was selling some skincare. I managed to make a few sales, make a few bucks. And I remember taking the kids and letting them go on a few rides. Yeah. And now fast forward, my son's now 18, and we're out shopping one day, and he sees the little fair in the mall, and he says, "You know what, Mom?" He says, "I remember back when we were little, and you did everything that you could. You even sacrificed things that you needed so we could go on those few rides. I have never forgotten that." Yeah. I just about bawled that day.
I get it.
Because the sacrifices we make for our kids, they are worth it.
Absolutely.
And I did fall in love with my kids at first sight, the first moment I held them.
Yep.
But one moment that I will never forget is the first time I got to hold my grandbaby. Oh, talk about love at first sight. It was like every sacrifice I had made in raising my kids was worth it with this 9-pound little bundle that I was holding in my arms. It just, talk about just melt Nana's heart. And now that little bundle's almost 2.5.
Yep.
And the other day he looked at me and he said, "Bye-bye, Nana." Oh, I was done for.
Well, I get that completely. This last weekend, actually it was on Monday, after I had spoken in Alabama, I drove to Georgia. I picked up my sister in North Georgia, and we drove to Nashville, Tennessee, because my daughter and son-in-law and my granddaughter and one of my grandsons that live in North Texas were going through that area, and they were going to see my other daughter and her husband and their son. And so I had them all in one place. So I took my sister up there and all that. And when I walked in the door, literally just walked in the door, the boys they can't walk yet. They're infants. But my 3-year-old granddaughter saw me and went, "Gray, Gray," and put her arms out and went running up to me. She calls me Gray, Gray. It was supposed to be Granddaddy, but you know what? I don't care what she calls me. But I get it completely. You know what my favorite thing too, Kim, about being a grandfather? I love it when I see my girls look at their kids now and how much love they have, and they'll turn around and look at me, and they'll look at me and say, "I get it. I know how much you loved me. You still do." But it's just, it's a cool thing.
It is. It is.
Life is grand.
And when you're an entrepreneur, you can think about things like legacy. Now, I'm not saying that if you're not an entrepreneur, you can't, but one of the things I love about being an entrepreneur is the legacy that I get to pass down.
Absolutely.
Like there's a lot of other things I pass down, right?
Right.
But I'm hoping that my kids and my grandkids see the fact that I'm willing to put myself out there. I'm willing to grow. I'm willing to change, right? I'm willing to become more than what I am. And I hope that inspires them to live the life of their dreams. Now, do they need to become entrepreneurs? Nope. Maybe they're not called to. I can tell you for a fact, my daughter has no entrepreneurial aspirations whatsoever. She's made it very clear she does not want to be an entrepreneur, but she has many times helped me in my business. But, I'm watching her starting to live her dreams. I'm watching my son, who is now a husband and a father. And, I'm just so amazed. But we're kind of getting off topic here, but I think it's a good rabbit trail. But Jeff, I know you've come prepared today with some great training on emotion and logic and how it works as an entrepreneur. So I want to let you loose to talk about that.
Okay. One of the things that used to puzzle me as a sales leader in the insurance industry, and it's puzzled leaders of companies and sales organizations across the country, it's how can you have two people who side by side look like they should both be very successful? I would say they look good, they smell good, their resumes are good, but you put them out in the field and you would expect both of them to succeed, and yet one succeeds great and one fails. Or you'll see organizations that the same thing happens. One company is very successful, one company is not. And so it was puzzling to me why that happened. And as I began to research for my branding and the books that I do, I came across the idea basically that there's one key principle, one key factor that really influences whether an organization succeeds or not. And it's how the people on that team, or even how they, with themselves, with their own entrepreneurial journey, answer one simple question. When it comes to this organization, when it comes to my career, will I persist or will I quit? That's it in a nutshell. I was telling our group this weekend, if the people who are supposed to follow you, if they are answering that question that they will persist, you're going to be very successful in your organization. If they answer that question, when it comes to my relationship with you, I'm going to quit, you're going to fail as a leader. And so I wanted to know how they made that decision. And I actually read some information from Dr. Antonio Damasio, who at the time was a professor of neurology at USC and an adjunct professor at the Salk Institute. And he had done a study about how people make decisions. And, I'd always heard, well, you've got left brain and right brain people. Left brain is the logical side, the mathematics, the control kind of thing. The right side is more creative, and being a musician, of course, I think I'm very right brain oriented. But the science doesn't really hold out that it's really left and right, but it does hold out that your logical portion of your brain and your emotional portion of your brain are two separate areas. Mm-hmm. And so Dr. Damasio was studying people that the neural pathways between those two areas had been interrupted, either by accident or by some sort of disease. The two parts couldn't communicate with each other. And what he found out in his study, I won't get too technical on this, but he found out that when it came down to it, those people could not make decisions. They could lay out the logical consequences of their decisions, but they couldn't actually make a decision about which way to go. And so what it really amounts to is that all decisions are made with a combination of logic and emotion, and there is no exception to that. Mm-hmm. And as entrepreneurs, we have to realize that about our customers we're trying to serve and about ourselves in our own entrepreneurial journey. If we're going to succeed, we have to understand that our positive emotions like joy, happiness, love, all of that, they create somatic markers or anchors, basically, that link whatever activity that we're doing at the time with that good feeling, and thus we want to keep doing that. And if they're negative emotions like frustration, burnout,
dread,
things of that nature, well, when that combines with logic, it still creates that somatic marker, but whatever activity we're doing at the time, we don't want to do that anymore. It's why so many salespeople actually get call reluctance, is because they're a little bit embarrassed, a little bit frustrated or whatever. And so they start linking that with a logical plan, and just the thought of going out and making sales calls starts to have a collision with them. Well, my branding, when I'm speaking and doing workshops with companies now, is called Fusion Points, Engage the Science of Persistence. And what I teach in those seminars is basically how to intentionally create those moments where positive emotion and logic are uniting, so that it creates a bond. And when it creates that kind of a bond, the fusion is almost impossible to break. Mm-hmm. And so it makes someone really be much more persistent in the career. So as entrepreneurs, what I always suggest for you, and I know I did this for me, is you've got to have something that is constantly in front of you that is kindling your positive emotions combined with your logical plan for success. If you don't have that logical plan for success and you haven't mastered that, all the positive emotion in the world is not going to make you successful. But if you master a logical plan so you can get the work done And then you combine that with your most powerful positive influences, like we were talking earlier with my children for me. And I got to tell with you too, Kim, your children, your grandchildren, it's part of what's made you who you are, is that tie. Well, when you combine those together, then an organization can grow, your entrepreneurial career can grow, and it will link it in such a way that the bond is practically impossible to break.
Wow, that's incredible. And you know, when you were talking there about sales resistance, like making the resistance to making those calls, and you know, I've experienced that so many times over the years, and you know, I've had to learn to fight it, because you know, it's like, okay, I put it off to the next day, but then as an entrepreneur, if you put it off to the next day, you have no money coming in.
That's true.
So, you know, money does become a motivator at times to get you to make those phone calls. I mean, you know, I understand as salespeople, you know, a lot of times they're commissioned, but sometimes as a salesperson, you are salaried. So, you know, if you don't make the sales calls that day, you know, you could probably get away with a few days of not really doing everything, because, you know, you still have that paycheck coming in.
Right.
But when you're an entrepreneur and you don't make those sales calls, you don't have a business.
You have to be productive every day. Something that I did early in my career, Kim, I read a book called The Psychology of Sales Call Reluctance. And I don't remember the author's name. It's slipping me right now, but it's a great book. It's written by a couple of scientists in Dallas. And I did two things from that book. I learned to really crystallize, again, why I was doing what I was doing. And then I also learned a technique that they taught, and it was a little bit about interrupting that somatic marker. And I did what they said. I actually wore a rubber band around my wrist. And every time as I would if I would have any call reluctance, and I could feel that in there, I'd pull that rubber band and pop it. And just that little bit of a pain sensation would interrupt the somatic marker, take my mind off that, and it made the call easier. So if that helps you in any way, my recommendation to you is always going to be, you get something on your computer screen as you're getting ready to make your calls that remind you why you're still doing it today. And that will change over your life. You know, I retired from the insurance industry 8 years ago. And so my why, and my kids are grown and they've got wonderful families. So it's changed over the years. But if you have something really crystal like that, and then if all else fails, pop a rubber band on your wrist, you'll make the call.
Well, I loved how you talk there about, you know, using different things to help keep you motivated. And for me, one of the things that keeps me motivated, and it may sound really strange, but I remember back when I first started publishing books, you know, I was going through a little bit of imposter syndrome. And I mean, I had written my own books first, so it's not like I wasn't an author before I started writing books for other people. But I remember at one point I was going through that feeling of imposter syndrome. And believe it or not, I had this God thought. And God said, you know what? I created you to make a difference in the lives of people. I created you so that you can help people get their messages out there, which makes a difference in the lives of other people. And how dare you not? When God says, how dare you not, you listen.
He has a way to know exactly what to say at the right time, doesn't he? I wish I could do that.
And ever since that point, I've realized that, you know, am I everybody's cup of tea? No, I'm not. But for those people that I was created to serve, how dare I not serve them?
Absolutely. And it's awesome.
Totally changed the way I do things, because, you know, yes, I get paid and I get paid well for what I do.
Right.
But, you know, my job is to make a difference in people's lives. And in return, I receive the value of money, which helps me live a life and helps me help other people.
Absolutely. And you've got, you know, in the little time that we've known each other through the Go Giver Success Alliance, it's really obvious that you have a spirit that is about providing a lot of value, a lot of service to other people. And you've got a good work ethic. And so it doesn't surprise me that you're doing well.
Okay, well, we've got a couple of minutes left here, and I want to get to your book. So it's called The Unexpected Tour Guide. Yes. So first of all, tell me a little bit about the book, and then I'm going to ask you the question I ask every author who's on the show.
Okay. The book is a sales fable. It's actually, people tell me that even if they're not in sales, they love the story in the book. It's about a young salesman who is trying to find his way, but he's really struggling. And he meets a homeless man, and it totally changes his life. And the lessons that he learns from that man are just really pretty incredible. It's won some awards as far as the book goes and all that. And it's something I'm proud of. Even if you're not in sales, if you're an entrepreneur, you actually are in sales. So I encourage you to read it. If you want to find out a little bit more about it, if you go to my website, jeffcwest.com, on the homepage, you'll see a trailer. I've got it set up like a movie, but we have a book trailer that's almost like a movie trailer that you can find out more about the book. But it teaches a lot of very valuable sales lessons in there. It's gotten some great endorsements from Bob Burg, from Brian Tracy, from Tom Hopkins. It's been a pleasure to have done that book. And I tell people that's a God thing for me too, because it's when I started writing it, I couldn't stop. And I used some real life people as characters in the book. One of them, since you said what you said a while ago, I'll tell you about this. There's a gentleman named Jack Amberson, who was my first sales manager on my first job. And I wrote him into the story, and I wrote some real life things between he and I in the story, but I also wrote his character into his character in the story. And one of the things that I learned from him that changed my life and my children's life and my grandchildren's life, I grew up in a family where there wasn't a lot of verbal expression of love. Not that my parents didn't love me. I know they did. They worked hard. I know they loved me.
But that wasn't their love language.
That wasn't their love language. And when I went to interview with Jack, I spent a few days at his house, and his kids were first grade, younger, whatever at that time. Every single morning as we were having coffee, getting ready to go out, his kids would come in there. He got them up on his lap. He gave them a big hug and a kiss. And he said, I am so glad that God picked me to be your daddy. I love you so much. And I'd never seen that. And so I would not have known to do that with my kids. But as a result, I did that with my kids, and they've grown up so confident in that love. And I've watched them do it with their grandchildren. It's so wonderful. I actually got to spend some time with Jack Amberson last weekend. He still cries when I tell him about the story. Anyway, I think you'll like the book if you get it. If you don't, well, I don't know what to say. Money back guarantee? I don't know. I think you'll like the book if you get it. And it's a short read. And Bob Burg actually makes a cameo appearance in the book.
Nice. Just very quick rabbit trail. It's amazing when you watch your kids do the things with their kids that you did with them. And it's so amazing. So here's the question I ask of every single author who comes on the show.
Okay.
What was the good, the bad, and the ugly of writing, producing, and publishing this book?
The good was the actual experience. And it's such a neat story that every time I go speak and people are coming up afterwards and I'm signing books and all that, it's a very rewarding end result. It was a joy in that way. The bad, if there was a bad, it's really trying to get through the idea in my head that as much as I love that book and I want it to sell millions of copies and all of that because I love the book that much, it's really, if you're an entrepreneur and you're becoming seen as an expert at what you do, your book is almost like your calling card. It is something you need to be able to go out and put in hands because it adds to your credibility. Mm-hmm. And so that was not the direction I mentally wanted to go with it, but it was so valid. And the coaching I got about that at the time was so valid that I later began to understand it. Now I still like to sell lots of books because I love it when people come up to me and just they say the things about the story. But that would probably be the one thing that was a little bit difficult for me in the beginning. Mm-hmm. More good when we did the book trailer. It was a joy. And I absolutely love the cover of the book. I can't explain it, but the person, Kim, who does what you do and was helping me with my book when I got started before we ever met, that person has been on your show, I understand, Doug Crow. his team put together my book cover, and I just absolutely love it. Absolutely love it.
Actually,
So,
Doug hasn't been on the show yet. I'm going to
okay.
approach him about doing an episode together. Now,
Okay.
Doug Crow is part of the Go Giver Success Alliance, and the three of us all mastermind together. And I love Doug. You know, Jeff and I were talking about before, and here's the thing about authority marketing, about being an entrepreneur. You know, and building your network of people. Your network of people should include people who do the same thing that you do.
Absolutely.
Now, Doug has a slightly different audience target market than I do.
Right.
But, you know, Doug and I get along great. We've referred business back and forth to each other. So,
Right.
you know, as an entrepreneur, you need to have a mindset that you are not in competition with other people who do the same thing that you do. There is more than enough business and more than enough sales in this world to go around for everyone.
And you and Doug set an absolute great example on that too. You really do.
When you have that attitude of abundance, it actually opens you up to receive more sales, more business, and you can easily refer business to other people without feeling the competition. And you celebrate when other people who do the same thing you do succeed.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Jeff, what is the best way that people can get a hold of you or get in touch with you?
Go to jeffcwest.com. Or if you want to email me at jeff@jeffcwest.com. But you'll find out all of my things are there, jeffcwest.com, including a lot of free resources for salespeople. And it's probably, some of it's for entrepreneurial. There's some things I did for Susan Solovic that are very entrepreneur oriented as well. And so feel free, if feel free to just reach out, and you can find me on Facebook, Jeff C. West. Matter of fact, if you saw my Facebook this weekend, you saw me sitting in a chair with my 3 grandchildren all at one time. And I said, Granddaddy heaven. I'm also on LinkedIn and Twitter. So Twitter, I think it's author Jeff C. West, something like that. And on LinkedIn, it's just look up Jeff C. West. You'll find me.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jeff. This has been an amazing interview, and thank you for joining us on the Author to Authority podcast. So this has been Jeff West and Kim Thompson-Pinder on the Author to Authority podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you on the very next episode. Bye now.